Thank you everyone for coming. It's our pleasure to host you. My name is Khalil Sayer. I'm the director of Agora Initiative, an organization that seeks to educate the public about what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and to promote peace between Palestinians, Israelis, and everyone who lives in the land. But to promote peace at this time is a very hard work at a time when we're seeing the images coming out of Gaza, the devastation, and the ongoing occupation of the West Bank as well. So at the very heart of what we do is to center the end of the occupation and the oppression of the Palestinians, because there is no point of talking about peace or coexistence or any sort of shared future for Palestinians and Israelis unless this injustice is ended as soon as possible. So I really grateful all of you are coming here to listen to this important event about the future of Christians in the Holy Land, especially in the West Bank and Gaza, at a time where their future is really in danger. And that said, I will give our host, Ami, who's a wonderful friend. He's the director of Idealist, who he would probably mention and explain what it is right now. He's on our board. He's a great friend and one of my favorite people in New York.
Yeah, I just want to say hello and welcome. I'm not going to say much about Idealist. You can look up idealist.org. I am not dressed as formally as these handsome men because I just work here, and I didn't dress up for the event. I'm sorry. All I can say, I'll just say one really quick thing, which is that the last 2 years have been a complete nightmare and sort of in many ways worse every day. And that the only blessing has been to meet some of these people, that one over there, and her mom, but Sharon. And that's really the only good thing I can think of in these past 2 years has been that I would have not met any of these people without this. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? There's nothing really left to say. I think words won't do anything right now. Everything is bad, and hopefully it'll get a bit better and not keep getting worse every day. But I'll just give you guys the microphone. I'm just a host.
I guess I'll introduce Dr. Marks. Dr. Marks is also a great friend, and she's associate professor at New York University, Abu Dhabi. And
assistant professor, but yes, only to professors do these weird words matter.
Yeah, and she's a great author. I mean, before I started Agora, I was at grad school studying Tunisia, and one of the things I was citing and looking at is her great papers on studying of democratization in Tunisia and Islamist movement, etc. So it's a pleasure that you happen to be in town and you'll moderate that. Thank you.
It's lovely to be here. This is an amazing panel that we've got ready for everybody. Welcome to this space, whether you're in the room with us physically or attending online, whether you're watching simultaneously or you're watching later. Thank you for being here. I think by the end of the hour, you'll hopefully conclude that this is time well spent. The event will be 1 hour. We're going to spend the first 45 minutes just doing some casual Q&A here as a panel, and then we're going to open it up to audience question and answer. Before we do that, let me tell you just a tad bit about our wonderful speakers. This is really an amazing group. It's hard for me to think of 3 people who are better positioned to discuss the present and future of American foreign policy and Palestinian Christians and their well-being than these 3 people in front of you today. First of all, we have Khalil in the middle, who is the founder of the Agora project. And Agora focuses on thinking about how to build a better, more humanizing, safe, secure future for all Israelis and all Palestinians. And I've just been so impressed watching Khalil's work over the past couple of years. He lost family members of his own in Gaza, born and raised in Gaza, a Christian from Gaza, someone intimately connected to the conflict. But at no point have I ever seen him use dehumanizing language against Jewish Israelis. He is an absolute ally, a partner in the fight against anti-Semitism and in the fight for Palestinian rights, dignity, and freedom. So thank you for that, Khalil, and for all you do and for setting this up. We also have with us Pastor Hannah Massad, also born and raised in Gaza, born and raised as a Christian in Gaza, but an Orthodox Christian, and became a Baptist, became an evangelical Christian later in life, after having studied at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California, where he did his theological graduate work studies. He, like the other members of the panel, is an author, but he was also, for 12 years, the pastor of Gaza Baptist Church, which was Gaza's only evangelical church. It still exists.
Yeah.
It's hard for anything to function, of course, at the moment, given the dire circumstances. But he also wrote a 2018 book called Pastor from Gaza, which you can find on Amazon, about his own life, and became an American citizen, and is also the president of Christian Mission to Gaza, which does missionary and humanitarian aid work, helping Palestinians and people in the MENA region more broadly. And last but certainly not least, we have with us Sohrab Ahmari, another critical independent thinker whose work I've really learned a lot from over the years. Sohrab is Iranian-born, but became an American citizen, and also converted to Christianity after you came to America, right, Sohrab? And has become a very influential, important thinker, mover, shaker in the conservative Christian, especially Catholic thought space here in the US. Was an editor at the New York Post, was an editor at the Wall Street Journal, went on to found Compact Magazine, which features diverse, interesting, critical voices on a range of issues, and has written multiple books. His books include From Fire to Water, published in 2019, a spiritual memoir about his conversion to Catholicism, and The New Philistines, published in 2016, which was an early critical work about identity politics, kind of presaged some of the current critical debates that now feel old hat after last election cycle. But welcome to all three of you. I'd like to pose each one of you a question focusing on the past, present, and future. Hopefully we'll have enough time. And after 45 minutes, we'll open it up to audience questions. Let me just make sure I'm keeping time here. Great. So to kind of set the scene and give us some background about your work and your lives. I know some people are coming in with a lot of knowledge here about the situation for Palestinian Christians, but as you three know all too well, there's a lot of Americans who don't even know that Palestinian Christians exist, who don't know the lineage of Christianity and its roots in the Holy Land, and think everybody in Palestine is Muslim and don't really know what the Armenian church is or the Greek Orthodox Church, or let alone understand that even under Hamas rule in Gaza, Christians have been present the entire time. So I'd like to start with you, Dr. Hannah. If you could tell us a bit, just to set the scene, about what you found to be the biggest challenges for Gaza's Christian community before and after October 7th. I know you've spent so much time, you were there most recently in Gaza in October, I guess it would have been late September 2023. So you have a lot of up-to-date knowledge, and I know that you tried to go back to the West Bank, to Palestine, in May of this year for a church conference at Bethlehem Bible College. But you were stopped by the Israeli authorities, even though you had approval, electronic travel approval from the Israeli government. So if you could just say a few words about the biggest challenges for Palestinian Christians before and after October 7th in your view.
If I just may quickly, our roots also as a Christian go back even to the day of Pentecost. Like, when Peter preached his first sermon, there was 14 different ethnic groups. One of them are Arab. So really our roots go back. Basically, the challenge, people will ask me what it's like to live and minister in Gaza, and basically I will say we live between two fires. We have the fires of the militant Muslim in one hand, but also we have the fire of the occupation. And really the big challenge, how as a Christian able to reflect Christ's love in the midst of these difficulties. One of the big challenges also the siege we live under for so many years. It's not just me, but even my father lived almost all his life under occupation. So that's one of the main difficulties we have, how to reflect Christ's love in the midst of these challenges.
Yeah. A lot of people will be surprised to know that there was not only multiple Christian churches, but there was and remains an evangelical Christian church in Gaza under Hamas rule.
Yeah.
Can you explain the challenges of navigating Hamas rule as a Palestinian Christian before October 7th?
Well, one of the things make it clear for us, we're able to worship in the church building, but one thing to make it clear, even when Brother Andrew came to Gaza, who's the founder of Open Doors, they said evangelism, it's a red line you shouldn't cross. So we have a freedom to worship, but really to be free to reflect or share your testimony of who you are, just to be yourself. This is no. You have to be careful what to say, how to say it in Gaza. But by the grace of God, we're able to find some ways to reflect Christ's love even in the midst of these challenges through the library, which is part of the church, is the only Christian public library in the whole Gaza Strip, and also through the relief work, not only for the Christian community, but also the wider community. And God used that to bring and plant good seeds even in the difficult time.
And lastly, for this first round of questions, before I move on to targeting Khalil here, in the post-October 7th period, is there bandwidth for Christians in Gaza to really even focus on reflecting Christ's love? That seems almost like a luxury pursuit.
Yeah, it's not easy. Gaza Baptist is really, member-wise, is very small. But God really used it for something good. And we, even today, since the war started, we partner with the church, with the Christian Mission to Gaza. And by the grace of God, for example, we're able to provide more than 47,000 hot meals, not only for the Christians, but also for the wider community, and also provide clean drinking water in different locations in Gaza. So God used these small seeds to reflect Christ's love, and we do it usually under the umbrella of Gaza Baptist, because you know how they connect Christianity with the West. But here we are as local to say we care and we love, and this is what Christ teaches us. And I'm sure God using even these little things by the grace of God.
Thank you so much. Khalil, I'll pose a similar question to you, but since you're not just a Palestinian Christian, you don't focus only on spiritual things, you're also a political analyst, and quite a well-known political analyst at that, focusing on Palestinian politics and the Israel-Palestine conflict. What would you say, wearing those multiple hats, were the main challenges for Palestinian Christians, particularly in Gaza, but you can also speak to the West Bank pre and post October 7th?
Sure, yeah. So I think to answer the question, I'd like to start by telling a little bit about the story of myself and my family. In 1948, when the State of Israel was created, it wasn't really a happy moment for the Palestinians, as many of us know, because the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians have happened as a direct result of the creation of the State of Israel. And that has caused, many families to flee or to be forced out of their own land. Their private property was confiscated, etc. One of whose family is mine. My grandparents came to Gaza with nothing because their land was confiscated. They used to live in a city called Majdal, and located in the southern part of historical Palestine, now known as the city of Ashkelon, within recognized territories of Israel. So that was the context of many of Palestinian Christians. The biggest wave of Palestinian immigration that we had historically was in 1948, because Palestinian Christians were pushed out of the land to Jordan, to Lebanon, and many were pushed to the West Bank and Gaza. So that's historically what was the biggest challenges that we've had as Christians, is the occupation, the siege, etc. But looking contemporarily more into like the near history sort of, I think we've had a survey published in 2019 asking the question, what is it that is causing the Palestinian Christians to leave? Because there is a phenomena here. Christians are leaving. We are right now less than 1%. We used to be 17% of the population. We are less than 1%. Actually, 0.8% is the population of Christians in West Bank and Gaza, including East Jerusalem. What is the cause of that? We wanted to understand, and that was published by Dr. Khalil Shiqaiqi. I was involved at that. All the people who asked the survey were Christians. We were very sensitive and careful how we asked it. And we find that number one reason for why they're leaving is the economy. The economical situation is extremely hard.
This was pre-October 7th,
pre-October 7th. That was 2019, before even COVID was a thing. So it was, the economy is number one. Number two is the Israeli occupation. Number three is another element of the Israeli occupation, which is settlers' terrorism. And then number four comes other domestic issues, such as, relationship to Islamist groups, militias, relationship to Palestinian Authority, corruption, etc. But the three main reasons are the economy, then the occupation, then the other element of the occupation, which is the civilians, Israeli settlers, civilians who live in the West Bank and act in in ways that can be described as terrorism. And even if you look at the economy, and there's a lot to be said here, but according to World Bank, only Palestinians waste about over 20 to 30 hours a week at checkpoints in the West Bank, and that's one of the few causes of the really dire economical situations. How can you build an economy when you waste 20 hours a week at checkpoints? How you build an economy when you have to, literally, if you want to send a piece of paper to Palestine today, it can take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, etc., if it arrived, because the Israelis control the border, etc. So all these factors were the challenging for the Christians. Now in Gaza, it's a particularly different context, because you've got a siege that targets Muslims and Christians, target the entire population, as Pastor Hanna alluded. And this siege have really devastated the situation of everyone in Gaza. But in addition to that, to the brutal Israeli policies toward Gaza, the question of Hamas and the fact that their government has been a challenge for the Palestinians in Gaza. Because for the first time in 2007, we had a government in Gaza that claimed to have domain over the public square in terms of religion and what can be a religion in public square. All of a sudden, we had a movement that is illiberal, that want to Islamize the society. And by nature, if you have a liberal movement generally that want to Islamize or Christianize or Judaize the city, then by nature, the minority feel uncomfortable. And that's, I think, contributed also to the fear of Christians in Gaza before October 7th.
Mm-hmm. And post-October 7th, my guess is that things have been a lot worse by almost every metric for Palestinian Christians. Could you elaborate just a little bit on the difficulties regarding Hamas's Islamist rule and the Israeli occupation pre-October 7th versus just the types of things that you think from your interactions with your own family and friends are weighing down on Palestinian Christians in Gaza now?
So interestingly enough, after October 7th, we didn't have any issue that is mentioned with Hamas. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We didn't have any problems with Hamas. Hamas didn't harass any Christians, etc. But we had over 5% of the Christian population in Gaza were killed by the Israeli military. Especially on October 19th, 2023, we had part of Church St. Porphyrius, which is a historical church that that was built in the 3rd century, was destroyed by an Israeli F-16 missile that was hit there, killed over 17 people, majority of whom are children and women. We've had attack on the Catholic Church, Holy Family Catholic Church, sniper attack in December 19th or 18, December 18, 2023, where 2 women were killed and 7 people were shot at the church very clearly. And we had the recent attack on the church that killed 2 people as well, not to mention people whom died due to lack of medical care and due to the devastation because of the destruction of the hospitals there. That's in Gaza. In the West Bank, what many human rights organizations, including Israeli human rights organizations, have registered is that the amount of settler terrorism, or settler violence as it's called, has increased dramatically. And interestingly enough, this time, one of the biggest targets of this settler violence has been a city, a small town of Taybeh, the Christian village in the West Bank. The only Christian village in the West Bank has been attacked over 5 times at this point, and attacked over and over again by settlers and the Israeli military, unfortunately, and police are not doing anything. In Jerusalem, we have the church are being squeezed more and more with taxation, something that even during the Islamic Khilafah didn't happen toward Christians. Now the Israelis are imposing taxation, etc., on the Christians there. There is a clear project in Jerusalem as well to what's so-called Judaize the city, meaning to make the city exclusively Jewish by certain radical elements within the Israeli society that used to be really a minority, but right now they're running this government. Certain part of the government is run by them, Mr. Ben-Gvir, Mr. Smotrich, etc. These are people who make it clear that they want the city to be exclusively Jewish, and that's why you see an increase in things like spitting on priests in the streets of Jerusalem, etc. The police is not doing anything because it is systematic, and it comes from Ben-Gvir himself, who runs the police department in Israel.
We'll talk more about this question of what we could term accelerated Zimmi status for Palestinian Christians. For those in the audience who haven't heard of this term, Zimmi, DHIMMI, this is a term used to describe the traditional position of in particular Jews and Christians, under centuries of Istanbul-based, what was for most of history, Istanbul-based rule of the Ottoman Empire. But it also applies to Islamic rule more broadly. The idea that under Islam, people of the book, Jews and Christians, are protected by the Islamic rulers, but in return, they have to pay higher tax for that protection. And the way it worked out is they often couldn't access higher appointments, and there was also often informal and formal modes of discrimination. But it sounds like what you're describing, Khalil, is almost like a deepened or worsened form of Zimmi status under Jewish supremacist rule for Palestinian Christians, given the fact that the Israeli state is taxing Christian churches so much more.
That
now.
seemed that what's happening. It's
Okay.
unfortunate. Actually, worse than Zimmitude, because the Zimmi status, for Arab Christians to say Zimmi, it's insulting, because we see ourselves as citizens. We're equal to our Muslims brothers and sisters. We're all Palestinians. We don't see ourselves as Zimmis at all. But even under the Zimmi status, the churches were taxes. Under the Zimmi status, you will be taxed as a Christian, but the church is exempt from taxation.
Right, the Ottoman Empire didn't tax churches, it taxed
They did
individuals.
not. Right now, and that's why a lot of people, like our grandparents, used to move the ownership of their land to the churches for them not to be taxed. So we would move our land ownership to the Orthodox Church. That's why the Orthodox Church is the biggest owner of land after the Jewish Fund in Israel and Palestine. Because it wasn't taxes. So today, this is a new phenomena that we're facing today, and we've seen the freezing of the banking accounts of the churches today in Jerusalem. A new phenomena that is indeed worse than Zimmitude.
Yeah, just today, news broke that the Israeli state froze all bank accounts of the Greek Orthodox Church of the Greek Patriarchate in Jerusalem, all of the bank accounts, and that it's going to impose higher taxes, likely on religious sites. So this question of economic viability is a huge one. It's not just a question of, can you survive the bombs if you're in Gaza, or settler terrorism if you're in the West Bank. There's even a question for Palestinians in East Jerusalem, which tends to be safe from those two threats, about economic viability of livelihood of the community even continuing. Sohrab, we turn to you. You have been such a fascinating voice. You're someone who I always enjoy following because I can't predict your positions based on one position, which is a quality that I find interesting always in a commentator. And don't worry, my pen dropped. But Sohrab, when these attacks on churches were first happening in Gaza, the Holy Family Church in December 2023, that Khalil had family implicated and victimized in that attack. There was a Palestinian British member of British Parliament who had family trapped in that church. You know, it was getting some high-profile coverage. Also, here in the States, I believe Justin Amash in Michigan, who, is he still a Republican?
Libertarian.
Yeah, libertarian representative in Congress also had family stuck in that church in December 2023. So there were these high-profile attacks on churches that have happened over a year ago, but it's really only been in the past maybe 6 months, unless I wasn't following you closely enough, that I've heard you become a strong voice on this topic. Could you say a few words about your evolution and what led you to speak out here as a Christian of Iranian origin in the States?
Thank you, Monica, for moderating, and thank you to Pastor for being here, and Khalil for inviting me. I have, in a way, the least equities in this discussion, because although I'm Christian, I'm Iranian. I'm of Iranian origin and an American. I'm not Palestinian. However, look, let me start with a baseline, which remains my baseline, and it has not to do with Christianity, but with the Jewish people's right to a sovereign state. That was a conclusion that I reached when I was 20 years old. My critics often say, he changes his mind a lot, but fundamentally I was like a very hard leftist in college, and everything else since then has been like one form or other of kind of conservative or Christian thought. I became a Catholic in 2016. So this is long before that, when I was 20 years old. And I surfed over to the website of Yad Vashem, which is the Jewish state's official Holocaust memorial and museum. And I was deeply, deeply moved by the stories of the righteous among the nations. These are a dirt poor Polish farmer who took in his Jewish neighbors during the Shoah and at risk to his own family and his own life. A Japanese diplomat who kept issuing visa after visa until it wasn't possible anymore. And even though his own government was close to, of course, part of the Axis. Or an Egyptian urologist I learned about at the time who created a certificate of Islamic conversion for a Jewish protege of his, just so she wouldn't be deported from Berlin. He was Berlin-based. And I was very moved. And for me, that was, to encounter the stories of the righteous among the nation, there was a big kind of philosophical conclusion, which is that politics and ethics cannot be neatly separated, that fundamentally politics has to be ethical and about helping ordinary people be able to follow their consciences. And so for me, I mean, obviously at the time I was as a kind of Trotskyist, and I would, I was obviously just like,
you were a Trotskyist?
Just out of college.
That's shocking.
Just out of college, and I was like, it was easy to say, as like Eric Hobsbawm did in his 70s, but in my defense, I was only like 19, 20, be like, well, the revolution may require many deaths. But then after those stories, you're like, no. Politics is what would you do? Would you be righteous? Would you be willing to hide your neighbor? But at a secondary level, I concluded, and I still do, that look, if we're going to divide up the world into nation states, something that happened in the beginning of the 18th and into the 19th century, then the Jews are eminently entitled to one of their own. And I still believe that. They tried conversion like Heinrich Heine, didn't work. The goalpost was moved. It's not good enough that you're Christian. You have to be like racially European. They tried becoming good European nationalists, didn't work. That's Herzl himself, right? They have to be biologically European, and so on. And then, of course, the events of the Holocaust happened. So that's my baseline. However, in recent years, especially, after October 7th, it became harder and harder to just blindly kind of maintain an Israel right or wrong position. Partly it had to do with what was happening in the West Bank, where I started saying, look, ruling over 5-7 million people, however many it is, permanently as a kind of underclass, over whom Israelis exercise this near total right of life and death. How long can that go on? How is that just? And how is that good for the character of the Jewish state itself? And then, of course, it's one thing to respond to October 7th, but then the degree of recklessness with life was beginning to bother me. And I started saying, mostly just all I would do, because I'm Catholic, I would just retweet Pope Francis's calls for a ceasefire. He began doing it months ago. And that was it. I wouldn't say much more. I will say that after the attack on the Holy Family Parish, and especially after the way that the Holy Father now, Pope Leo, came out with fairly strong language, I think I and many other Catholics have found it in us to speak up. And it's kind of, I almost feel ashamed that it had to be, because it's like once my co-religionists were attacked, and tens of thousands of Muslim people from Gaza were also suffering so much. But I think it's an opportunity to, not to rethink everything in my case. I don't see any other solution but a two-state solution. I still don't. But to be able to criticize. I'll say, Khalil, I was looking at his organization's Twitter bio, and it said something like, finding peace and ending the occupation. And for me to come as a former op-ed editor of the New York Post, I was like, whoa, that ending the occupation. And then I was like, wait a second, that's actually the official policy of the U.S. government. It's not some taboo thing, right? It's not. It is the official policy of the U.S. government. It's the official policy of the European Union. It's what is just. Why is that so taboo? And I think, it's okay to go through this period of shattering some taboos, and hopefully out of this horror that's unfolding in Gaza, we can push for a just solution. I don't see any. Two peoples that Their lives are inextricably bound up, and it cannot be that one has absolute right of life and death over the other. That's the basic.
Thank you for sharing that fascinating journey with us, Sohrab. And I think it's a natural human process to be likelier to feel comfortable speaking up on controversial topics and to feel more deeply as a person when people who share a lot of traits with you are affected. It just is. And that segues beautifully into my next question for you, Pastor Hannah. As Sohrab was discussing, the Catholic Church has become quite vocal through Pope Francis and now Pope Leo about what's happening in Gaza. And I think you've seen a real visible shift there. But the American Evangelical Church is in quite a different place, it seems. It seems like that is one of the more difficult nuts to crack in terms of simply awakening American Christians to the reality that Palestinian Christians exist and that there might be a hugely difficult moral series of atrocities against them that are being funded by US tax dollars. What's your theory of the case there? Why is it so much harder to break through with the evangelical community? As a Palestinian evangelical from Gaza, who pastored Gaza's only evangelical church, why do you think it's difficult? I mean, maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think it's not difficult, and that's perfectly fine too. And why does it matter to alert American evangelicals in particular, and Christians more broadly, but in particular evangelicals, to the existence of people like yourself and to dynamics like those we're discussing?
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes people are surprised that there's Christians in Gaza. I never forget I was in one of the churches and there was a break between services and, somebody came to me and he said, basically, how you say you've been blessed, and you took the land of Israel. And he knows, that I'm from Gaza. And then he said, there's no such things called Palestinians. I mean, people go. And as if he's saying in your face that you're not existed. And
this was just a random American Christian who said this, or was it a pastor or someone with power?
A person coming, to attend the service, and he believed it seemed what he said. I was in a shock. So, for us as a Christian Palestinians, sometimes we walk on a thin thread. For example, when I try to express the pain I'm going through as Christian Palestinians, and in the same time, try to be careful not to be accused that you are anti-Semitic. And this was really hard, like when my aunt, been killed in this war, and when other Christians, friends had been killed, when father have to bury all his 3 children at once, and also the lady who played the piano for Gaza Baptist for many years, Sister Ilham, she shot by sniper, lived in the streets of Gaza, bleeding until she died, and many other stories. A friend who's a lawyer was talking to Brother Khalil, and he lost his eye, and another young...
This was all post-October 7th.
Yeah, and another young man, he's one of the top students in the whole Gaza Strip, he'd been injured in just the last, when the missile struck, the Latin Church compound, and this will stay with him for the rest of his life. So there's many stories. Yeah, it's a big challenge, but basically I try to share with my brothers and sisters here in the West about my story, and I found it maybe that will help them at least to see the other side of the coin and maybe to see the whole picture. For example, my father's side of the story, in 1948, I share with them that we lost about 67,000 square meters of land. And we have documents to approve it, but we're not able to do anything about it. And also just...
And we being Palestinians, writ large, yeah.
Yeah, and also just, where I grew up in Gaza, the house took my father 10 years to build that house. And this is where my daughter's, born, and it's leveled, it just completely demolished. And so when I try to share, so hopefully my brothers and sisters in the West will try to think. And also there's another approach sometimes I take, which is, I didn't want to take too much time, but it's, theological perspective from according, the New Testament, when you look to the Old Testament through the lenses of Christ, the lenses of the Gospels, and also that helped them to rethink, hopefully, and to see who's really the people of God, which is who's anybody, everybody who believed in Christ become part of the family of God. So yeah, there's some thoughts I try to share and hopefully help them to rethink and really to have more balanced perspective about the whole issue. Lastly, just let me say, I mean, one of the things I try to say to my brothers and sisters, I believe there's a prophecies, but God going to do it anyway, if I agree or disagree. But there's three things the Lord asks of every one of us as Christ follower, which is Micah 6:8. The Lord asks every one of us to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before the Lord. And all of us are, requested by the Lord and His word to do that and to reflect that. So these are some of the thoughts I try to share with others.
You mentioned the challenge of avoiding being charged with anti-Semitism. And I think in particular, when we think about having this discussion through the lens of Christian values, there are special challenges that might present themselves regarding anti-Semitism, given how much violence against Jews has historically been done by people professing Christ-like values. But think about the Catholic Church's relationship with Adolf Hitler. Is there anything in particular you do to reconcile yourself with that history or to avoid the anti-Semitism?
Well, I mean, basically, we as the Christ followers, when we have this encounter with Christ, we cannot help but except love everyone. And because we experience His love, we're able to love not only our people, but the Jewish people as well. And because we experience His forgiveness, we're able to forgive even the people who hurt us. God really knows what we went through, and this is why we say when we live between two fires and how to reflect Christ's love in that. But we try to share our own experience and how the Lord, help us in this difficult time. And also another challenge, thing which helped me personally, try to arrange my priorities in life. Really, what is the most important thing? To know Him and to make Him known, my family, and then the ministry that the Lord trusted me with. And also to by the grace of God, try to see things from God's perspective, because we have a higher call, and we made our mind as Christians, and this is what many Christians in the Middle East made their minds. This is the way we want to live. We want to live by the power of love.
Those are
and the
beautiful
power,
lessons.
yeah, and the power of forgiveness. We're not going to allow unforgiveness and bitterness to rule in our life. If we did, we will lose our effectiveness and lose God's call in our life. So Jesus is our ultimate example. He never took a life of any person, but He gave His life, not only for us, but for everyone, for all the humanity. And this is the example we want to follow.
Thank you so much. It's kind of amazing to hear someone talking about forgiveness, given how many people close to you you've lost. But what a beautiful set of values to look for in any holy book, including the Bible. Khalil, you've also suffered incalculable losses, but you're another person who talks about keeping Christ-like values in your perspective, and you're another person who centers also fighting anti-Semitism. Can you talk a little bit about challenges you've had from other pro-Palestine people who aren't comfortable with that language of forgiveness, maybe aren't comfortable with your approach? And I'm asking you a double-barreled question here, I'm cheating. And I know you've also been at the forefront of efforts to make people on the right who care a lot about Christianity in this country, particularly MAGA voices, more aware of the existence of people like yourself and Pastor Hannah and the challenges you've been dealing with. How do you feel that's going? So, double-barreled question.
Sure, yeah. So to start with, the question of reaching people on the right, especially because this correlate with being evangelical usually. I mean, this is a Protestant country, whether we acknowledge it or not, it is. Majority Protestant country at least. majority of people belong to an evangelical church or another and have developed a certain theology through which they look into this conflict and through which they look into what's going on there. And that theology impact how they see the Palestinian-Israeli relationship and the way they see the land, etc. And especially, I think that the fancy word that usually is used, dispensationalist theology, right? This theology that looks to the world through like dispensational, which is basically different periods for different times, and there is a time for the state of Israel to be reborn, and therefore we have to support the state of Israel no matter what in order for Christ to return and to reclaim his kingdom, etc. And thus, the implication of this type of theology is that no matter what the cost, no matter what's the ethical dilemmas you're dealing with, it's still worth it. Because, the cause is really good, which is that Christ will come back, etc. Now, this has been the case for so long that majority of evangelicals have been really following the dispensationalist theology in the US here. It's been, even if those who are not following it directly are influenced by it through the media. CPN, TPN, etc. All these are evangelicals, dispensationalists who preach dispensational theology. Recently, though, we have been seeing a phenomenon where more and more evangelical theologians refuting the dispensational theology perspective, etc. And that doesn't have to do only with the Palestinians. I mean, there is a huge literature on the ethics, of dispensational theology when it comes to Palestinian Christians writing back and refuting this theology. But it also has to do with the fact that dispensational theology itself has its own contradictions with the historical teaching of the church. Because the church historically didn't teach anything up until the 19th century like dispensational theology. So I think this is collapsing. And because this is collapsing, I think in the new right is taking more and more view that is critical of the state of Israel. Not to say that they are anti-Israel or that they are completely pro-Palestine, but they're looking at it more critically. And to be honest, I don't want them to become anti-Israel. I want them to become pro-Palestinian rights, to see us just as humans, nothing more, nothing less. So I think development has been happening. If you look at the numbers, the statistics, the younger evangelicals are very much sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And that's a good thing. And the younger evangelicals, a lot of them don't see as much theological significance to the state of Israel in their theology. And this has to do with the fact that the seminaries today, most of the seminaries, evangelical seminaries here in the US, with some exceptions, don't teach dispensational theology anymore. Not because of Palestine, but because it's not a good theology. As simple as that. Now, comes the other issue that a Christian in the West have to deal with when talking about Palestine. On the one hand, you've got the dispensational thing, right? On the other hand, you have the very real issue of anti-Semitism. The West historically has been, and especially the Christians, has been seriously anti-Semitic to an extent. They rejected the Jews, they persecuted them, etc. And in the post-Holocaust theology, there has been all sort of teaching trying to deal with the dilemma as if that the theology was the problem that caused anti-Semitism, right? And the only way to solve it, I think the West has dealt with it, is by supporting Israel and supporting Christian Zionism. That's sort of the conclusion or the only solution that they had to come with. Now, again, I'm not talking about supporting the right of Israel to exist. You can believe that. So hard believe that, and that's fine. A lot of people
There's a huge difference between that and
absolutely.
uncritically writing blank
Exactly.
checks.
Christian Zionism lead you to a place where you have to write a just white paper to whatever Israel does, everything like a blank check, basically. Everything they do is right. And I think that's the challenge that I have as a Christian, as a Palestinian, as a activist, analyst, whatever, have in this country is that Christians in general have a Jewish problem. We have to be honest with it. And I can conclude it with this, the Jewish problem here in the West, among Christians in the West. On the one hand, those who idolize the Jewish people. The Jewish people are perfect. God wants them to bless them, want them back in the land. God wants this and this and that. And that's a problem. And I think this could lead to anti-Semitism too, because you'll put them in certain place where human beings can't be. And on the other hand, you have those who dehumanize the Jewish people. The Jews are sort of running the world, they're controlling the banking system, they're controlling the government, etc. And this is really disturbing and disgusting anti-Semitism that is also spread among Christians because they're somehow accused of being the killers of Christ. So how do you walk this line where you're not falling for each of those tropes? I think is my challenge. I want to walk in a place that is based on Christian ethics, based on Christian principles, where I do see the Jewish people as humans equal to me, and they deserve every right like I deserve, but I don't believe that they deserve any right more than me. Not at all. They don't deserve to come and confiscate my property, like what happened in 48. And today, now that we acknowledge the two states as Palestinians or accept it, I think they don't have a right to a state that I don't have as well. I have to have my state as well. I have a right to a state, then you have a right to a state. You have right to a state, and I don't. I think it's an unfair situation. When it comes to the pro-Palestine situation, I think there are two things I say briefly, because I know I've taken a long time. One, I think that the pro-Palestine movement generally are critical of this kind of approach of anti-Semitism because it's been weaponized against them. You know, when there is a definition of anti-Semitism, that like the International Holocaust definition of anti-Semitism, where it says every criticism of the state of Israel or how it was created in 1948 is anti-Semitic, this will, of course, rebuff a lot of people. If you tell someone like my grandpa, it's anti-Semitic to say that when they confiscated your property in 1948 and kicked you out of your church and took the church and turned it down, this is anti-Semitic, he would lose his mind. How can this be anti-Semitism? I have to speak about it. If you tell me that the bombing of the church in Gaza, if I speak about it, I'm anti-Semitic, how is that anti-Semitic? So that's I think the issue. Now, on the other hand, yes, we have to understand the state of Israel claimed to be a Jewish state, and that it claims to speak on behalf of the entire Jewish people. And the state of Israel is doing terrible things today. And when terrible things happen and you're a Jewish state, unfortunately, this also spill over to anti-Semitism, even among Palestinians or pro-Palestine movement, because not everyone is able of being a perfect victim of some sort. Not everyone is able to be that. We thrive because we're Christian to abide by the ethics that Suharb and Pastor Hannah walks through, but not everyone is capable of that. And that's why I have critiques. But when the critiques come against me and they'll say, well, Khalil, you're trying to be a perfect victim, for example, or you're trying to be too nice or whatever. You know what? I get frustrated, but I most of the time have more sympathy for these people because I understand the pain. I understand the pain of anti-Semitism weaponized against us, etc. So what's the solution? The solution is to define anti-Semitism as it is. I personally use the term Jewish hate. Jewish hate is never acceptable, never justifiable, and it's never conflated with the right criticism of the state of Israel. Now, if you criticize
Now, there has to be a way of criticizing Israel's crimes as a state and Jewish people who commit crimes against Palestinians without being anti-Semitic.
Our criticism of Israel has nothing to do with it being Jewish. Of course. It happened to be Jewish. If it was Buddhist, we probably would have problem with the Buddhist. It happened to be Jewish, and it's on our land, and it's oppressing us right now, and that's why we have the struggle. Now, have it not being Jewish, I don't think we would even be thinking of the question of the Jewish question, because even, and I mean, I don't want to get into that too much, but even in Arab culture, generally, historically, there was no Jewish question really like in the West. The Jewish question wasn't a thing until recently. We had incidents of anti-Jewish hate, obviously, you know, even during the Islamic Khalifa and the Ottomans, etc. But it wasn't a big question like in the West. It came with the start of the colonization of Palestine and the aftermath of that. That being said, I'm similar to Suharb. I accept two states, despite that it's, to an extent, I would say it's unjust, despite that we lost property, etc. We're willing to make this compromise. Unfortunate reality today, one side, which is us, at least the moderate in the state of Palestine, accept two states. The Israeli society and state, unfortunately, reject it completely. Can we change that? Can we get to a place where we both accept each other? That's the challenge.
And to move away from all supremacist frameworks, be they Jewish supremacist, like this kind of new Muslimi status, or Islamic supremacy, any kind of supremacy.
Or Christian supremacy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Khalil. And Sohrab, a last question for you before we open it up for Q&A to the group. In recent days, I listened to a fascinating podcast that you did with Batya Ungar Sargan. Some in the audience, some of our listeners will have likely heard of Batya. Batya, if you turn on your television screen, you might see her as a commentator on CNN or Fox News. She's a prominent pro-Israel commentator, and like Sohrab, she was somebody who started off on the left and kind of ventured to the more populist right. But there's this excellent, I mean, it's just fascinating to listen to a podcast on Unheard. Was it like a week ago?
That's my
right. That's your current affiliation on Unheard. Where was it a week ago? Was it that it came out? Where you're talking with Batya about Israel, and a couple things that podcast sparked in my mind couple questions were, first of all, there's this debate over whether we actually are seeing a sea change with the American right, and particularly the Christian right's views on Israel. We have seen for a long time now a very clear polling direction that younger Americans across the political spectrum, including younger Americans who identify as Republican, are getting more and more critical. But there's this debate, and it was a debate that you partially had with Batya, about whether this is a real trend, a real generational sea change in Americans' views on Israel, headed in the direction of more critique, or whether it's kind of just a flash in the pan and Trump is totally in touch with his base and it's going to blow over. And there was also an interesting moment in that podcast where you guys were discussing international law and morality. And Batya said that she believes there's a difference between judging whether something is moral and whether it abides by international law. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about both those things, the direction of the United States, where we're heading vis-a-vis Israel. Is this a real change in MAGA? Is it just a flash in the pan? And from a Christian commentator perspective, I know you used to be an editor of First Things, the Catholic magazine.
I never worked. I used to write for them, though.
Thank you. But as somebody who's thought a lot about Christ-like values, what it means to have Catholic values, particularly in politics, how do you come down on this law morality debate?
So the first question is hard to gauge. And the question is, to what extent is public opinion on the American right, but also public opinion generally, is shifting on Israel? I will say there are some indicators. First of all, on the Democratic side, the unfavorable rating for Israel is astronomical. I mean, it's like 70, 80%. Among independents, it's generally more unfavorable as well. Among Republicans, it's 71% favorable. However, if you bore down into the demographic details, the group that has shifted most sharply toward unfavorable among all other demographics are Republican men ages 18 to 49, young Republican, or at least under 50 Republicans, who are now at 50% unfavorable. In 2019, they were 35% unfavorable. So if you add all of those groups together, it's a pretty dire picture. And you combine that with the recent ferment among conservative influencers and podcasters and so on, and what's happening on the left. And I just think that this is why, because I speak as someone who cares about the Jewish people and about their state. And I think unless they change course, that could be the pathway to permanent pariah status. I mean, I'll just be honest. Now, Batya obviously disagreed, and she thinks that Trump is fully aware of where his base is and they're with Israel. I think, again, if you break it up by age, it becomes a more complicated picture. And then if you bring in the full national picture, not just the right, but independents and Democrats as well, it becomes a much more dire picture from a perspective of Israel's reception in the American public square. I will say, from my own part, I do see, by the way, that on the online right, there is really, really odious anti-Semitism afoot, like old-fashioned Jew hatred. And
it's been shocking to watch, actually.
It is
worse than anything I would have ever anticipated.
It is so open, like gas chamber jokes and all this stuff has been going on. But I will say, the problem is when that is conflated. Like, I've spent a lot of political capital and energy trying to combat that kind of anti-Semitism on the right. But when it's conflated with criticism of Israeli actions, it actually makes it more difficult. And I'll identify two phenomena. One is that having been largely a pretty pro-Israel guy, like I wouldn't be able to work for like Rupert Murdoch publications if I weren't, to then if I criticize a little bit, it's like, Sarah Abamari's an enemy now. He's an enemy. Like, well, if you do that to enough people, that has a sharply polarizing effect. People conclude, well, I am a little bit critical because I don't like seeing pictures of emaciated kids. I guess I am anti-Semitic. Like, that's a really dangerous path to go down. And I will
Maybe a bit similar to how on the left, a lot of people felt that because cancel culture on the left was just so strong, as soon as you disagreed with any part of people's viewpoint, then you were a MAGA right-winger, which actually pushed some people to the MAGA right.
Precisely right. Precisely. I said there's some dynamic like that as well. And then, within, and I have to address this because Pastor Hannah went into it. And I know I'm probably running over my time, but there are these. He's too generous. I mean, I really lost it over the Holy Family shelling, where these kind of very dispensationalist evangelical Christians. There was a guy whose name is Joel Berry. He runs the website Babylon Bee, who tweeted and said, "Well, the thing is, there's no true believing Christian in Gaza who is not underground. So the ones who are actively out there as Christians must be
fake Christians? Oh.
Hamas apparatchiks or Hamas apologists."
Fortunately, I didn't see that online.
And so, what it revealed is this, frankly, I think an Anglo-American Protestant phenomenon of treating, it's a theological divide and it's uncomfortable to talk about, but apostolic Christianity, Orthodoxy and Catholicism, as somehow not like real, but sorry, but but Christianity began in a high school gym in Arkansas, right?
Which helps shed light on this evangelical question that I was discussing with Pastor Hannah.
So that was very troubling, and I was associated for a very long time with this group called the Philos Project, which was geared toward, as I understood, I was on the advisory board from the very beginning, where the idea was serious Christian engagement with the Middle East. Very good, I'm game. But then when the Holy Family shelling happened, the response from the executive director was I'm only slightly paraphrasing, a very short tweet said, "What a tragedy, pray that Hamas surrenders." Like, okay, well, yeah, maybe, but there's this thing that's happened, and shouldn't you, as people who aim to seriously engage with Christianity, speak up more? And then a much longer, and this has shot my blood pressure up and brought out the Iranian side, the Middle Eastern side of me, where it was a much longer statement saying, again, tragic, but very quickly, but then accusing His Eminence Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch, of being an anti-Semite because he complained about it. At long length, saying, for 2,000 years the church has made such claims, and that's easy. It's much harder to blame Islamism, but the church doesn't speak out against Islamist violence against Christians. First of all, that's not true. There are entire ministries, lay and clerical, within the Catholic Church whose job is to highlight the plight of Christians under Islamist rule. Pope Francis named the 21 Coptic martyrs who were beheaded by ISIS. He added them to the Roman martyrology, which was an unusual move. It pissed off a certain kind of Catholic traditionalists because those were Coptic martyrs. But he added them to the Roman martyrology.
I'm learning so much here. You're getting deep into the weeds.
And he made a visit in solidarity with Iraqi Christians who had suffered from Daesh and ISIS. So what are you talking about? The church doesn't talk about any other suffering Christians except Palestinian Christians. That's simply not true. And there was zero expression of sorrow for what happened, zero expression of maybe we should investigate, zero expression of, well, our community is going to raise funds for the Holy Family. Nothing. It was just sort of like, Cardinal, you're an anti-Semite. I'm sorry. That's outrageous. And that really made me, I quit the board of the advisory board of Philos, and so did Ambassador Alberto Fernandez, who's a longtime career diplomat. By the way, a very pro-Israel guy, but he cannot tolerate that kind of thing, apparently. I haven't spoken to him or why he made that decision. Anyway, what was your second question?
I weaseled one in about morality versus international law and that conversation you had with Batya.
Look, I get it. So I sometimes understand that because, international law can often feel like a fiction. And what Batya's point was that I accept the principles behind the Geneva Conventions, but I don't accept the law as the law because who enforces it? And I think that's.
And she's MAGA, America first, so she doesn't want an enforcer
I guess so,
either.
but look, there's a lot of Israel's legitimacy rests on a vote at the United Nations, right? So and a lot of the Geneva Convention and so forth are in part a response to the Jewish people's experiences in the first half of the 20th century. So I disagreed with her, and I encourage you to watch the debate. I feel bad because she's not here to speak for herself.
No,
so,
I encourage everyone to
she's
watch
quite
and listen.
eloquent,
And
so
no, I
watch the
do wish
full debate.
Batya were here
But
that we could engage
I
with her too.
think it's very a dark road to go down for Israel or its supporters to say, we just reject international law in toto.
Yeah. Thank you so
in
much
part
to
because
everyone.
the state rests on international law.
We have about 10, 15 minutes for a few questions. And thank you all for your patience. I know we started a little bit later than we intended, but I think these three speakers have laid out some of the most important points of debate in the conversation about US foreign policy and Palestinian Christians. Any hands? Anyone with a question? Yes, you in the back, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name's, can you hear me?
And if it's okay, I'll take 3, and you guys just respond to what you want to respond to. Okay, great.
Thank you so much for coming to New York and sharing your story with us. I think of October 7th also as the anniversary of Rami Ayad, of his passing, and I was just curious if you could talk more about how his life has impacted the church in Gaza, and just comparing outreach to Christian outreach to Muslims and then Christian outreach to the Jewish community, of just the challenges of being a witness to Jews in Israel and to Muslims in Palestine.
Very interesting question. Yes.
Thank you for such a lovely panel. I learned a lot already, but I'd love to delve into one of the questions that Monica asked about the change in the minds of a lot of American Christians and how they've become a lot more open to criticism of actions of Israel. Obviously, the U.S. support for Israel has been historically very strong, sometimes against a lot of public opinion. There's realpolitik reasons, I imagine, and special interest politics reasons. How do you see that interacting with the changing public opinion within the Christian groups in the United States? And how do you see that playing out in interaction with the public opinion shifting within the conservative American spheres?
And did I also see a hand from you, Ami? And then we would like to thank Ami Dar also. We're hosting this event at Ami's space. He's on the board of Agora, and it's thanks to his generosity that we're here tonight. Thank you so much, Ami.
Oh my God, so much to say. Well, I'll try to keep it to just a question, but I'm in a weird, I'm Israeli, I'm Jewish, I'm married to a practicing Catholic, which is a longer story. I baptized my daughter in a church in Spain. It's a long story. I don't know if there's any other Israeli who has ever baptized his daughter in a church in Spain. Anyway, many things, and I've been sort of active on Twitter since October 7th primarily, and I see through the comments I see, through the hateful replies I get from a whole variety of people. So yes, I see definitely much more permission in the US in the last 2 years to be anti-Israeli. But I say it sort of in that way because what I see is too many Americans, both on the left and on the right, who are more anti-Israeli than pro-Palestinian, let's put it that way. I think it reminds me, I'm old, it reminds me of the anti-apartheid fight in South Africa in the 80s and 90s, where I felt that in many cases it was more of an anti-white thing than a pro-black thing. And the moment that apartheid ended, many of those activists stopped caring about the black people overnight, basically. It wasn't really about helping the black population, it was getting rid of the white supremacy that bothered them for some reason, obvious reasons. And I think what I see on Twitter now, at least on Twitter, is lots and lots of anti-Israel feeling, more than, in a sense, truly deep pro-Palestinian rights and pro-caring about a future. I put up a tweet a few weeks ago saying, this is the worst moment that I can remember for Israel. Israel standing in the world. But if you're pro-Palestinian, don't celebrate, because it's also the worst moment ever for the Palestinian nation. And unless we find a way forward out of this, we're both basically doomed. And you don't see enough of that. I see more, and that's where I think this borderline anti-Semitism happens, when you see someone like Tucker who I wouldn't call Tucker a Palestinian lover at this point. I think he's found permission to be anti-Israel and borderline anti-Semitic. I don't think he's being, going out and on a hunger strike for Gaza tomorrow. I don't see that happening. But anyway, that was long.
That's a really interesting issue you highlighted, Ami, this question of whether some of these new voices on the MAGA right or on the new right who've spoken out, and on the left, absolutely, are maybe more anti-Israeli than pro-Palestinian. Well, you guys have laid out some really interesting questions. Let's just go Hannah, Khalil, Sohrab. Feel free to respond to whichever you like.
Well, concerning Rami, his wife said Rami could come back if he chose to, if he did what these people want him to do. And we believe they want him to be converted to Islam. But when he refused, they didn't know what to do. They executed him. And he continued really to inspire us with his faithfulness. He wasn't 30 years old yet when he murdered, 2 more weeks to go. But the legacy he left really, as a church, as a community, as Middle Eastern Christian, continue to encourage us and continue to inspire us to be faithful to God's call in our life and continue to reflect his love, regardless what the cost. And it's a challenge for all of us because many want to follow Christ, but really the question, when there is a price have to be paid, are we willing to pay that price? And Rami was really a great blessing. And so thank you for thinking about him and his family.
He ran, just for anybody who doesn't know, Rami Ayad ran, if I'm correct, the only Christian bookstore in the Gaza Strip and was killed by, I think we still don't know exactly who killed him on October 7th amidst all the chaos and melee and violence.
Yeah, actually he was working with Suhad, my wife, in the Bible Society. And so it was, But thank you. And at that time, it became dangerous for us. This is why several families in Gaza left because this militant group tried to go after other team members. So this is why we evacuated. And but we continue Gaza in our heart. This is why I continue to go back since 2010, 3 times a year to encourage the church and also the community. So thank you. Maybe I leave the other questions too.
Thank you, Pastor Hannah, and so sorry for your loss, all your losses. Thank you for being here. Khalil.
I guess Sami's, I'll take your questions. They're not questions. I don't know where to start, but yeah, let's start with anti-Israelism is more than pro-Palestinians. I think that people don't know enough yet, and it takes them time to learn how to do the right thing. I think that a lot of these people grow up idolizing Israel and idolizing the Jewish people generally, and now they're realizing that no, there is a problem, and we've been lied to all that long. And the switch is quite painful and quite dramatic, that it comes in a very awful way. And I think that it would take time for people to mature in it. And I think of it as like, think of any convert of any sort, convert from another religion, convert from another politics, etc. They come out very strongly at the beginning against whatever they're converting from, and then they start coming down on what they are and they start articulating their point of view. So that's perhaps what we're seeing. In addition to that, there is another phenomena that I agree with you that is dangerous. That is to say that any Israeli, no matter what he do, no matter how amazing he is, like you are, I know that you're amazing, you support our rights, you don't support the genocide in Gaza, etc. There is no way to redeem yourself no matter what. You're deemed because you're Israeli. And that's, I think, is a dangerous phenomena. I do see this on the left especially a lot. I'm very critical of that. I spoke against it. I'm against it because it dehumanize people. It minimizes them to a certain thing that they see them as, and it almost remove their humanity. And that's a dangerous thing, and that's bad. I don't know if that's the same as anti-Jewish hate or anti-Semitism. I think it's a particular new type of hate. We saw it too for a little bit around the Russia-Ukraine thing, where people start boycotting Russian restaurants. I mean, like, Russians, what's the problem with being Russian? why are you doing this? But start happening, etc.
Or like
So
not
Tolstoy
having
novels.
Tchaikovsky.
Tolstoy.
Don't perform Tchaikovsky. Dirty.
So exactly, yeah. So things of that sort, and that's I think is the difference. From we need to address that. It's very prominent in among pro-Palestine activism generally, but especially in this city. There are groups in this city that have taken these views that anything you disagree with, no matter what, is a Zionist. Any Israeli who disagree with you on 1%, according to them, I'm a Zionist. Even I'm a Zionist. So I don't, I'm not gonna spend so much time on these people. Now, on the right and Tucker, I personally don't think Tucker is an anti-Semite. I mean, I don't know the guy. I tend to watch everything he published when it comes to this issue. I don't watch other stuff. I think he has been fascinating. It's a fascinating development, etc. Where it's coming from, etc. I don't know. I think time will tell. But again, the problem is that some of these people have been not allowed to speak about this issue for so long, either because of ideological restraint, like dispensational theology, etc. And all of a sudden, they're opening their eyes, and thus they'll come strongly, and it will take time to come down, or because, like in Tucker situation, for example, he was in Fox News, and I don't think Fox News would have allowed him to say the stuff he's saying right now. So I think it would take time to see where this phenomena leads to. But I totally get the concern, and I think that being pro-Palestine to me means to accept Israelis when they turn away from supporting what's going on in Gaza, because there's no other way. We're not gonna remove them. We're not gonna send them anywhere. They're there to stay, and we have to live with them. We can think. I mean, you brought South Africa, and that's what happened, right? Minority of the white people left, but the majority stayed there, and that's, I think, what we should aspire to.
And I guess I'll take the question about how changing perceptions of Israel intersect with foreign policy. And I guess it'll address Ami's point as well. And it goes something like this. Look, I think there is a kind of insidious phenomenon going on the online right, which is the rise of a kind of Nietzschean, neo-pagan, racist, and it often, like, the anti-Semitism goes hand in hand with anti-black.
Not even
racism.
talking about Christ-like values,
No,
just
no,
like
it's
pure
just like
Ubermensch. Yeah.
The worship
or
of-
wannabe Ubermensch.
The worship of power. Now, the hilarious thing is they're often anonymous. I'm like, look, if you're the Ubermensch, put your name to your tweet, right? Like, it's like, come on.
At least have a spine.
Come on, son of Thor. And often there's a subsidiary phenomenon, which some may find amusing, is if you actually encounter who these people are in real life, often they're not exactly Teutonic specimens. Let me put it that way.
Teutonic specimens. That was very
they're-
euphemistically stated.
yeah, they're
so
often
probably.
like it's like a guy's like Indian, or he's like
World of Warcraft basement.
North African, like not they don't look like those
that too.
like SS pictures of the ideal man with the blonde. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, that's happening, and it's odious, and it should be combated. But I think in the serious foreign policy space of the right, there's a rise of people who are now not in there. They don't have the cabinet level jobs for the most part. They're like the assistant this and that in the Pentagon or the State Department, and they're not anti-Israel. They don't have any. But their mentality is, I think America's major challenges are at home, or I think America's major challenges are in East Asia, having to do with China, and I just want America to leave this region. And so when Israel, sort of bombs Syria willy-nilly, these, even if there's some justice to the Druze cause there, or does this and that, it's like gonna drag America in. So it's like, it's not pro-Palestinian. It's not even anti-Israel. It's like, the hell with it all. We just want to leave. And I think that's a normal sentiment, right?
Kind of parallel to the sentiment on a lot of the new right about Ukraine, Russia.
Yeah,
right.
It's just
we just don't want. We just want to wash our hands.
This isn't a strategically important region anymore. The U.S. is energy independent, and then some. We can supply our own energy needs with fracking or whatever forever, and renewables. Like, the Middle East isn't that important anymore. Ukraine was never that strategically important. Our challenges are in East Asia, so I just don't care anymore. And that's not necessarily I see it as a fairly healthy instinct. It's not anti-Israel, it's not anti-Ukraine, it's just realistic. So that, and I think that is actually a pretty popular, to your question, that's a pretty popular position with ordinary Americans. It's like, I don't care. I can't pay for my groceries. I don't, you carry out your whatever conflicts. But I think it's possible that, that could have a salutary effect policy-wise for the Palestinian people, because if simply just not supplying a blank check will force the Israelis, both their leadership and their society, to act more modestly or prudently.
Well, thank you to all three panelists. I think you guys want to do another round of questions? All right. I was trying to keep us on time, but fabulous. All right. Well, in that case, you in the back, we'll take 4, and then we'll pose the questions to the panel. Now you've unleashed me. Now I don't have an end time. This is very dangerous.
That will be the end.
Okay. All right. You in the back, please introduce yourself before you ask.
My name is Bashar, and I want to comment on Ami and Khalil. Ami and Khalil are not the exception as a Palestinian and Israeli. And also for Ami, Israelis are not all of them like agreeing with Benjamin Netanyahu. They're not Benjamin Netanyahu. They're not Itmar Ben-Gvir. They're not Basil Smotrich. They are actually the exceptions for Israel, of me visiting Israeli friends.
There are always exceptions.
Yeah. And just like right now, because democracy in Israel, they are in power. But they are not, we need, as me as a Palestinian, and Khalil and so many, we need to be clear that that's not Israel or Israelis. They're loving, caring, like us, we are the same, but different backgrounds. I just want to emphasize on that.
A comment. Did you have a question? Guys, let's let the panelists respond. Can you just mention your name, please?
Bashar.
Thank you, Bashar. And did you have a question?
You
just wanted to put the comment on the table. That's fine. That's totally fine. We'll go ahead and take all 4 hands I saw, and then we'll let the panelists.
How have American Christians unintentionally contributed to shrinking Christian presence in the Holy Land, and what we can do differently?
Okay, thank you. And did I see a hand? You in the fight?
Oh, yes.
If you don't mind saying your name and.
Yes, of course. My name is Tamar. I'm an Armenian with parents rooted in Istanbul, Turkey. Born here, but thank you so much to all of the panelists. It's just been incredible listening to all of your backgrounds and stories and perspectives. I don't know if I necessarily have a question, but I just wanted to empathize and say that I totally understand this plight, and coming from a background of genocide survivors myself, it's just devastating that this is something that is so relatable, especially in the 21st century. And I'm experiencing similar conversations in my personal community as an Armenian with roots still in Turkey, and also with the recent Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's been difficult to have these discussions and community efforts to bring our respective peoples together to kind of reach common ground. So I guess, thinking on my feet now, and the fact that we're here with Agora Initiative, what would be your advice for someone like me who is trying to kind of bridge that gap between Armenians, Turks, Azeris, and honestly, Israelis and Palestinians as well, because, there is the Armenian Quarter in Jerusalem, and I had the pleasure of going there in 2023, and I actually met Ihab on that trip, coincidentally, and we've maintained a friendship ever since. So yeah, thank you so much. And perhaps we could talk off the record as well.
Thank you. So advice for bridge building from people with experience in the mother of all polarizers, the Israel-Palestine debate. Yes, I saw your hand and yours, so you first. Go ahead. And if you don't mind saying your name and...
What is the future of the Christian in the Holy Land? I think that was the topic of the event.
Is there a future also? Yeah.
What is the future? That's why we just concerned. What's the future of the Christian Holy Land?
Great question. And one last question before I bounce it back to the panel here.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to apologize. I'll make a quick little statement and then a question.
But it's not going to be open mic night,
that,
I can tell.
I'm that anthropological specimen. I was chairman of the College Republicans, Young Republicans. I've worked for the RNC. I run a human rights organization. Work closely with Jewish organizations my whole life, and was scandalized by what happened in Gaza. But one thing that really struck me is in this meeting, we always treat the Palestinians as a means to the end of preventing the rise of anti-Semitism. When I was in Egypt with Khalil and we were evacuating wounded pregnant women and we were interviewing them, someone said to me, Jason, you're going to be called anti-Semitic for rescuing Palestinians. You should be prepared for that. So I was sitting in my hotel in Cairo working on an article trying to analyze myself and my hidden anti-Semitism and share it with the world. And I'm like, I have cousins that are Jewish. The first 8 times I was drunk was at bar mitzvahs. But I was searching.
You went to 8 separate bar mitzvahs, and those were the first times you got drunk?
I mean, I got drunk the first 8 times. Like, I was drunk a lot as a junior high kid. And I
have so many questions, but I won't delay this.
But then I discovered something about myself in a basement in Cairo with Khalil, that I was a virulent anti-Palestinian bigot. And it's so ingrained in us that we don't even recognize it. In the past 8 weeks, a congressman said drop atomic bombs on Gaza, no consequences. The ambassador to Israel insulted the country of Ireland, France, and England all in one magical tweet, and Catholics, for wanting to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, no consequences. 2 days ago, the Speaker of the House went and met with settlers and said, those Palestinian Catholics' land is yours, no consequences. I've been writing about the rise of anti-Semitism in my community for 20 years. It's there, but it's powerless now. It won't be always powerless. But we need to stop treating Palestinians as means to an end. Palestinians even do that. I used to be a Filipino supremacist. I'm not anymore. I'm a Palestinian supremacist. They're my favorite people. Every time, whether I'm in Bethlehem or Haifa or Washington, D.C., they're telling me about the rise of anti-Semitism, and we need to stop it. So this is my question. Maybe it's not a real question. It's a statement. It poses a question so you don't think I'm a bigger jerk than you already do. How do we finally get people to treat Palestinians as an end in themselves, not just as a means to an end of persecution of another community? That's my faux question. Okay.
All right, we'll go down the line just like we did before. Pastor Hannah.
Well, just maybe just a few points, and then the brothers here will. Basically, I think one of the important things for us as a human being and as also Christian, of course, all of us are created in the image of God. So this is why when I look at you and you look at me, I can see God in you, because all of us from one source. And it's good to keep that point in our minds. Also concerning how the Christians in the West affecting Christianity sometimes, unfortunately, in negative way, especially, which is really difficult, which is when Christians in the West, if they mean it or not, they're using scriptures, they're using verses from the Bible to oppress people who's already been oppressed. And instead of standing with them and staying to encourage, but to use the scriptures to. So for us, as I didn't like really to use much of the word Baptist, because I see it more, we are followers, and the main thing is Christ himself. It's not much denomination here and there. But as a Baptist, pastoring Baptist church, I remember when I was in Gaza, sometimes in the newspaper, big newspaper in Israel or Palestine, they said, oh, the Baptists in America, supporting Israel, doing this and that. And then maybe next day, some Muslim neighbor walking down the street, see, Baptist church, and how they will connect what they hear in the news. So that was difficult. You try to explain yourself, where people sometimes accuse you as a Christian Palestinian that you cooperate, with Israel, because when they see and hear the headlines in the news in America, this sort of things. So this is just some of the thoughts came to mind. So I just give it to Brother Khalil and Brother. So,
There's a lot. Which one shall I pick? Okay. So,
I'd be talking about the bar mitzvahs personally.
I'll leave this to Suhar, but I think he's much better. So I think, like, back to Bashar's comment, I mean, two things. I think we would like to think that majority of Israelis think differently than Netanyahu and think differently than Ben Gvir. The unfortunate reality when it comes to the Palestinians, the surveys and the data shows that they do think closer to Netanyahu, at least, not Ben Gvir, than the other way around when it comes to us. And that's unfortunate and uncomfortable for us to realize that. The question we should pose to ourselves, what does it take to change that? Instead of just going at someone like Ami, who is not of this group, and just attacking him and attacking every single Israelis, how do we approach it in a way to win these people to become like Ami instead of other way around? So I don't think we should deceive ourselves. The Israeli society, unfortunately, I say it unfortunately, is in a very, very dark place, in a place where the surveys show that no one sees a problem with what's going on in Gaza. Those who were asked, would you like to even know more about Gaza? Over 80% said no. When they were asked about starvation in Gaza, they said over 80% said that's fine. So there's disturbing data, and we have to deal with that. And I don't possess the answers to all these questions. I think it's good to look at other examples in the world historically, and how was it dealt with this deep level of dehumanization, where you dehumanize entire population in this way, and how do we get out of that is the real question. And then that leads to Tamar's, I think, in a nice way, because in a way, I hear a lot of people say that what's going on in Israel and Palestine is a unique thing or a unique evil, meaning you make the Israeli people a unique type of evil. I also reject that premise because it happened in Armenia by the Azerbaijanis, it happened in Turkey, it happened in others. And I think that's what, to humanize, I mean, many would say, to study genocides and the history of genocides, like in Armenian genocide or the Holocaust or another, the entire point beside to understand human nature and how it is a human thing to commit atrocities. It's awful, it's wrong, it's just a human thing, and we have to acknowledge that. So I think the way to, I mean, I don't know if I have answer to how to fill the gap necessarily, but I think one of the things you have to keep in your mind all the time, that this is part of human history, and it happened in many different places, whether it's in Armenia or in Palestine and other places. And how do I want to take the side of the most vulnerable? How do I want to take the side of the people who are being slaughtered, no matter who they are? I personally have been very much standing with the Armenians, with the Armenian ethnic cleansing happened just a few years ago, despite that I have no connections to Armenia whatsoever. I see a lot of people standing with Palestine, despite that there is no connection whatsoever. And if, God forbid, anything happened to another nation, even to the Jewish nation, I would hope that I would also stand on this side, on the right side of history, and say no to these potential atrocities as well.
We saw your public positions on October 7th, and you did stand.
And that too, yeah. When crimes were committed,
yeah.
I was very clear that I condemn crimes when crimes happens.
I guess it falls to me to wrap up. I do want to mention the Armenian question as well. I went and obviously, as the blockade of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh was happening, I wrote numerous articles in outlets left and right, trying to draw attention to it. Unfortunately, South Caucasus is like getting Americans to pay attention to Brazil is difficult, let alone countries with names like Azerbaijan and Armenia and regions like that. But look, it was, I will say that again, that's one of the areas where I began to openly criticize the Jewish state, was the fact of arming Azerbaijan it's given that Armenian and Jewish people shared history of genocide to then to act in such a coldly realpolitik way, like it's a tough region. But I think that the degree of investment in the Baku regime, this like thuggish, really unbefitting of the Jewish state. But on the larger point, I began with my own story about Yad Vashem, and I will say this: that the same institution, Yad Vashem, its director, about a week ago, published an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post, not even in Haaretz, but in the Jerusalem Post, in which he took issue, and the institution, as institutionally took issue, with the Milosevic-style statements that issue from figures like Ben-Gvir, Smotrich. He said that the discussion of all Palestinians as all of them terrorists, and that there's no distinction between civilian and military, is unacceptable. The talk of driving all Palestinians off the land. It's these kinds of things that you hear from Ben-Gvir. And I say this because we do have to remind ourselves that, those of us who are Christians, as Pope Benedict taught in his Regensburg lecture, it is the Jewish people who gave the world the gift of ethical universalism. All the people, the pagans all around, had local gods, local deities, right? And then comes the God in the burning bush who says, "I am being itself. In fact, my name is I am." And so that's there in the Jewish tradition. And the worst anti-Semites want to sever the Jewish people from ethical universalism, because they say when the Jews talk about emancipation and this and that, they're really just disguising their own particular ethnic preferences. And of course, the hardcore Jewish particularists as well, the Ben-Gvirs and the Smotriches of the world, also want to sever the Jewish people from their heritage of ethical universalism by saying, no, the opinions of mankind don't apply to us. International law means nothing. Just we do what we want. And that both of those, of course, traduce the Jewish ethical heritage. And so I guess this goes to, what was your colleague's name in the back? No, Bashar. Bashar's point as well. Like, of course, all of Israel is not Ben-Gvir. All of Israel is not Smotrich and so on. We have to remember that, and to try to build bridges. And I'm so inspired by Pastor Hannah bringing up the Imago Dei, the image of God.
Thank you. May I just say,
we forgot Amjad's.
You want to do one? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, may I just say, thank you, Amjad. That's true. I mean, years ago in Gaza, we have about 5,000 Christian. We have 10,000. Now, unfortunately, I mean, before the war, it was about 900 individuals, Christians in Gaza. Now, it's just about 600. And of course, this is, we are concerned the number decrease. And probably after the war, maybe 300 going to leave. So not many will be left, even though the message of Christianity, it starts in Jerusalem, as you know. And in the West Bank, maybe there's about 40,000 or 50,000 Christians, and also the number decreasing, and it's very concerned. But in the same time, maybe try to encourage myself. Through social media, we see people from different backgrounds coming to know the Lord. We don't know the percentage in general in Palestine, and because this is something public, but God will not leave himself without a witness, and we see people coming to know him.
So I would just comment quickly on the future of, because it's something we discussed, but we did not discuss directly. I think the only way to ensure the future of the less than 1% population who are Christians in Israel and Palestine is to solve Israel and Palestine itself. It's to end the occupation, and it's to address the underlying issues that are causing that, whether it's radicalism or whether it's settler terrorism or whether it's the apartheid system, etc. All of these are contributing to the Christians leaving. There are two problems for the Christians in Palestine. There's one problem that they're Palestinians and they're being persecuted because they're Palestinians, and this can be solved once the conflict is solved. And there's the second problem of them being Christian and being persecuted as Christians. I think once we solve the first one, of them being persecuted because they're Palestinians, I think that the second one will follow easier. With that, I will give the mic to Ami to have he has a final word and we'll end.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to clarify one thing based on all the answers that I got. When I said that I see a lot of comments that are more anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian, and then in a sense you comforted me, I wasn't complaining. I actually meant exactly the opposite. It pains me that there's not more pro-Palestinian comment. That's what I mean, that there's not more scandal, let's nuke them all. That's insane. That the comments that you see are directed sort of against Israel and not enough about defending the Palestinians from anyone attacking them.
Like a
That's what I
positive
meant.
affirmative vision.
Yeah, like a positive affirmative vision.
Yeah.
Look at what's happening in Lebanon. Look what's happening in Jordan. Look what's happening in Syria. I care about the Palestinian people as opposed to only I care about who's attacking them. In this case, Israel. That's what I meant. Not I'm fine. I'm good.
A round of applause to Ami, who let us use his space, and to Khalil, the organizer, and to all of our speakers. I would just say in closing, as a professor of Middle East politics, I very rarely hear Palestinian Christians discussed. Even in academia, you don't hear about it enough. And there were so many interesting themes that you saw the speakers tonight engaging with, from simply talking about the realities and the various vices on Palestinian Christians to this broader question of whether these conversations opening up on the American right, and particularly on the new right with MAGA and amongst American Christians, if this is just a flash in the pan or if it's going to be part of a broader generational shift. Other issues like how to engage people on the right, in particular in the United States, and Christians, and have that conversation without unwittingly fueling anti-Semitic discourses at a time when Twitter's AI tool is advocating for Adolf Hitler. And this issue that Sohrab was discussing in particular about the intra-Christian debates and conversations about who's a real Christian, evangelicals, apostolic Christianity. These are all just such important nuanced, textured issues. And I really am grateful to everyone for organizing this event and to Ami for hosting. So thanks to everybody for attending, both physically and virtually, and have a lovely evening. Thank you.